What did you find most challenging throughout the transition? Because you're talking about like a big transition period, and I assume that also leads back to like when you said a sentence or phrase around like looking back at the Kubernetes journey, like the fact that it's open source and that it's widely adopted, that they go hand in hand. But I assume that was not trivial to see at the very beginning when you didn't even know what Kubernetes was. And it sounds like that there is a much bigger scale but similar realization as you've been going through that changing of that model of how you're making the contracts, how you're making the deals and business and partnership decisions. Um, how did that process go? What did you find most challenging throughout the process?
I think anytime you try to do something that is new, people that you need support from typically, and it's the same in any business, right? Your legal, your finance, there's these different disciplines. The same exists in government programs, right? There's an engineering faction and a finance faction and a contracting faction and a legal faction. You can't do anything alone, right? Like I as an engineer, even a program manager who even had money allocated that I could give, I can't sign the contracts. That's how the government's set up. So like you need a group of people to believe in what you're doing. The hardest part is convincing people to do this too. Like it is winning hearts and minds that it was the right thing to do. Because again, I'll go back to like people think you put out a giant proposal, you get a bunch of requests for proposal, you get a bunch of proposals back, you spend time in source selection evaluating them, you pick one giant company, you basically push the burden onto them to meet requirements and then they figure out who to work with. And so a lot of times when you try to bring this idea to people, they're like, it would be so much easier if we just did this, which is the thing we've always done. And I don't want to say people didn't want to learn, but they just realized that it like more is more. More everybody's busy. It's hard for government to keep talent, and they only have so many hours in a day too. So typically, like bringing this idea to them, you feel like you're trying to just explain to them like, hey, will you just do this thing differently? And you just meet a lot of resistance because it feels dangerous, it feels different. And so I think the biggest challenge was convincing people that this was the right thing to do. I think, I guess how I would summarize is like 20, 30 years ago, major corporations, the Fortune 500, realized that like having some level of software talent in house created the best business outcomes for them because they could make the trade space decisions at a minimum. If they're not developing things in house, that's fine, but they know as much as any vendor provider what is right, what is good, what is bad. The government, unfortunately, I think at that time, and I think it's getting better now, was like, hey, we don't need software talent in house. We contract that out. It's like any other company who said, hey, I'm going to do this thing, but all my contracted development is not here. It's an external business we're contracting with. Well, as you know, as people have been down that road, there's just so many inefficiencies. You make a mistake and you're stuck with it for a year and $20 million, right? It's a huge mistake. It may not feel like it at the time, and so convincing people to take like small contract bets with small companies and trying to integrate them with an integrator that understands software integration and portfolio management, that was a paradigm shift for people. And so just you end up just in hundreds of conversations between people at the Pentagon, people on Congress, people at your local program office, people who support your program office. You're in the same conversation over and over again. You feel like no matter what you say, people are like, no, it's too dangerous, too much work. Give it to a prime. Let them figure it out. And I'm like, we've done that for decades, and some of the things that are software intensive are not going well. The statistics are out there. You can go read them from GAO reports. And so yeah, you got to be willing to try new things. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to try new things. And that problem is not specific to government. That's specific to any large organization. So I think, yeah, winning hearts and minds.